Right now, in your kitchen, there's probably a bottle of cooking oil, a pack of seeds, a box of cereal, or a bottle of pesticide. They might have completely different brand names on the label. They might look like they came from completely different companies, but there is a very good chance that somewhere behind all of them sits the same corporation. A single company so large and so deeply woven into the global food system that most people have never even heard its name. This is the story of how one corporation quietly came to influence what the entire world eats. Most people assume that the food system is made up of thousands of competing companies all growing and selling different products in a healthy open market. And on the surface, that is exactly what it looks like. Supermarket shelves are full of different brands and different options, but underneath that surface, a very different reality has been taking shape for decades. Through mergers, acquisitions, and strategic control of key parts of the food supply chain, a small number of corporations have quietly taken over the foundations of how food is grown all over the world. And of all of them, one name keeps appearing at the center of the story more than any other: Monsanto, now owned by the German pharmaceutical giant Bayer. This is how that happened and why it matters to every single person on Earth. To understand how a company can control the food supply, you first need to understand something about seeds. Seeds are the foundation of all food. Every crop that feeds the world starts with a seed. For most of human history, seeds were something farmers saved themselves. After every harvest, a farmer would set aside a portion of their best crop to plant again the following season. It was free, it was reliable, and it had worked for 10,000 years. But in the second half of the 20th century, something changed. Scientists developed the ability to genetically modify seeds, changing their DNA to make crops resistant to certain insects, diseases, or herbicides. These modified seeds produced better yields and were more predictable, and the companies that developed them did something that changed farming forever. They patented them. For the first time in history, a corporation could legally own a seed, and if you planted that seed without paying for it, you were breaking the law. Monsanto became the most aggressive and most successful company in the world at doing this. By buying up seed companies one after another, they built a patent library covering an enormous portion of the world's most important crops: corn, soybeans, cotton, canola, crops that feed billions of people and that farmers around the world depend on every single growing season. But owning the seeds was only part of the strategy. Monsanto also manufactured one of the most widely used herbicides in the world, a chemical called glyphosate, sold under the brand name Roundup. And here is where the two sides of the business came together in a way that was either brilliant or deeply troubling, depending on how you look at it. Monsanto genetically engineered many of their seeds to be resistant to Roundup. They called these crops Roundup Ready. A farmer planting Roundup Ready seeds could spray their entire field with Roundup, killing every weed in sight, while their crops survived completely untouched. It sounded like a remarkable solution to one of farming's oldest problems. But what it also meant was this: if you were planting Monsanto seeds, you were almost certainly going to be buying Monsanto herbicide too. The seed and the chemical were designed for each other. Farmers who adopted the system found themselves locked into buying both products from the same company season after season. And as Roundup Ready crops spread across the United States and then around the world, Monsanto's control over both the seed market and the herbicide market grew at the same time. By the time most people noticed what had happened, the system was already deeply embedded in how global agriculture worked. The reach of this model did not stay inside the United States. Through trade agreements, development programs, and direct lobbying of governments around the world, Monsanto's seeds spread into farming communities across Latin America, Asia, and Africa. In many cases, farmers in developing countries who had grown their own saved seeds for generations were introduced to genetically modified varieties that produced better short-term yields. The results were often genuinely impressive at first. Harvests improved, farmers earned more. But over time, a pattern emerged that development economists began to document carefully. Farmers who switched to patented seeds could no longer save and replant them legally. Every season, they had to go back and buy new seeds. And because the modified crops were designed to work with specific herbicides, they also needed to keep buying those chemicals. Farmers who had once been largely self-sufficient found themselves dependent on purchasing inputs from large corporations every single year. When prices went up or when harvests failed, the debt that followed could be catastrophic. In some regions, the consequences of this dependency became genuinely devastating for farming communities that had very little financial cushion to absorb a bad year. In 2018, something happened that made the scale of this corporate control even larger. The German pharmaceutical and chemical giant Bayer acquired Monsanto in a deal worth $63 billion, one of the largest corporate acquisitions in history. The combined company now controls not just seeds and herbicides, but also a huge portfolio of pharmaceutical products and chemical technologies. Critics pointed out that a single corporation now had significant influence over both the chemicals used to grow food and the medicines used to treat the illnesses that some of those chemicals were being investigated for causing. Bayer inherited not just Monsanto's market position, but also its enormous liabilities. Tens of thousands of lawsuits had been filed by people claiming that exposure to Roundup had caused cancer. Bayer eventually agreed to pay out nearly $10 billion to settle a large portion of those claims, while not admitting that the product was harmful. One of the most interesting aspects of all of this is how quietly it happened. Most people who eat every day have no idea how concentrated the ownership of the global seed supply has become, and that's partly because the consolidation happened gradually over decades, and partly because the products at the end of the chain, the food on supermarket shelves, still looks like a wide and varied market. The brands are different, the packaging is different, the stores are different, but further back up the chain, where the seeds are produced and where the chemicals that grow them are manufactured, the number of companies involved has been shrinking steadily for a very long time. Today, just 4 companies control the majority of the global seed market: Bayer, which now includes Monsanto, Corteva, Syngenta, and BASF. These 4 corporations between them have an enormous influence over what gets planted in the ground in virtually every major food-producing country on Earth. Most people eating breakfast this morning had no idea. The reason this matters goes beyond any one company or any one product. Food security, the ability of the world's population to reliably feed itself, depends on agricultural diversity. When a small number of corporations control the majority of the seeds, the genetic diversity of crops can significantly narrow because companies naturally focus on developing and selling the varieties that are most profitable rather than the full range of what the world's different environments and communities need. Scientists and agricultural experts have warned for years that reducing crop diversity makes the global food supply more vulnerable to disease, climate change, and other large-scale disruptions. When a single variety of crop dominates millions of acres of farmland, a single pathogen that targets that variety can cause damage on a scale that more diverse agricultural systems would be far more resilient against. The concentration of seed ownership is not just an economic question, it's a question about the long-term stability of how humanity feeds itself. None of this means the food on your table is dangerous. The technology behind genetically modified crops has genuinely helped feed more people in some parts of the world, and that's a real and important fact. But there's a significant difference between technology that helps people and a system that uses that technology to create dependency and concentrate power in the hands of a very small number of corporations. What's worth understanding is that the food system is not a neutral, natural thing that just evolved on its own. It's been shaped by business decisions, patent laws, trade agreements, and lobbying by corporations with enormous resources and very clear financial interests. Understanding that gives you a clearer picture of why food systems work the way they do, why small farmers in many parts of the world are struggling, and why the question of who controls seeds is one of the most important and least discussed political questions of our time. The more people understand this, the more pressure exists for the kind of oversight and regulation that keeps these systems genuinely working in the public interest. Subscribe to Unfolded if this opened your eyes. We'll see you in the next one.